Historically, reconstructive surgery has been documented in the works of Sushruta in India in antiquity, in the Middle Ages in Italy by Tagliacozzi. However, the major advances were initiated after World War I. In the early days, it was called reparative or reconstructive surgery. We have an operation manual written by Dr. John Binney in 1905. He was professor of surgery at KU. We also have several handwritten notes by Dr. Sadler and Dr. Sutton showing the reconstruction of lower lip and jaw following resection of malignancy and traumatic injuries. This also goes back to 1905. In the United States, plastic surgery as a specialty was first organized in 1931. The American Society of Plastic Surgery was established that year. Prior to that time, it was all part of general surgery. Specialties appeared later. We have data that Dr. Mervyn Sadler was one of the early surgeons to do reconstructive surgery at the Kansas University Hospital. Dr. Sadler was born in 1875 and lived till 1956. He received his BS in 1894 from Maryland Agricultural College. He received his PhD from Johns Hopkins University in 1899. He went on to get his MD from the College of Physicians and Surgeons in 1901. He did his internship at the General Memorial Hospital from 1903 to 1905. Dr. Sadler was appointed as Professor of Surgery in 1905 and served in that capacity till 1924. In 1911, he was appointed as Associate Dean of the Medical School, and 10 years later, in 1921, he was made the Dean of the Medical School. 3 years later, in 1924, he was dismissed by the then Governor of Kansas for political reasons. The letter of dismissal and the aftermath, dated July 23, 1924, is in the archives. It is another story. Dr. Sadler then moved to Lawrence and practiced surgery till his retirement. The Clendening Library and Archives have documentation of many surgeries performed by Dr. Sadler. All the typed operation notes are available, and some even have black and white photographs. In 1918, there's a record of a von Langenbeck repair of the hair lip. In 1918, a lip repair, Van Brown with wire tension stitches and silver buttons. In 1917, repair of a cleft lip. In October 1917, there is a note about the Thiersch graft for a burn wound. In February 1919, there's an abdominal lipectomy and a hernia repair. Dr. Walter Sutton was the second one in the history. He lived from 1877 to 1916. Dr. Sutton was born in Utica, New York, and his family moved to Russell, Kansas, and he was raised on a farm. Walter Sutton started as a farmer and created many tools for agriculture. Sutton worked in the oil fields in western Kansas. He holds a patent for the hoisting apparatus for deep wells. It is patent number 850549, issued April 16, 1907. Walter Sutton started his college education at the University of Kansas in Lawrence in 1896. He started in the engineering school. Walter Sutton, interestingly, played basketball for the Jayhawk team, and he is seen here with his brother and Mr. Naismith as a member of that team. After a year, he's changed his major to liberal arts. His love for biology won out in the end. His work on the Mendelian dominance and chromosomal theory of heredity are well recognized as the Sutton-Bovary hypothesis in the scientific world. Walter Sutton obtained his medical degree in 1907 from the College of Physicians and Surgeons at the Roosevelt Hospital in New York. After his training in surgery, he joined the University Kansas Medical Center and the Bell Memorial Hospital in 1911. He was made associate professor at that time. Dr. Sutton was inducted into the Army during World War I and served as a second lieutenant from 1911 to 1915. Dr. Sutton joined the American forces to go to France and run a medical hospital there. He joined the American Ambulance Hospital in Juilly, France in 1915. The ability of the man to organize the management of war wounds became very evident from the beginning. Dr. Sutton is credited with writing a book titled Appendix on War Surgery. Dr. Sutton pioneered the use of ether by instilling it in the colon for general anesthesia. Dr. Sutton pioneered the treatment of peritonitis by irrigating the abdomen with saline solution and placing drains. This work was published in 1911. Appendix on War Surgery. Dr. Sutton maintained that military hospitals and care centers must be at 3 levels. The first level is to save lives, the second level is to save limbs, and the third level for reparative surgery. He developed what we refer to as the ABC of trauma care in 1915. Dr. Sutton recognized that sepsis was a big killer in war wounds. He created a system of probing the wound for foreign bodies. Dr. Sutton created a system of bandaging the wounds. The principles outlined include drainage, removal of foreign bodies, irrigation, bandaging, and immobilization. His instructions included smelling the bandages 4 times a day for the first 48 hours. Dr. Sutton recommended the Carroll's apparatus, which is seen in Appendix on War Surgery, page 81, figure 1567. The system included an irrigation system irrigating the wound and a suction device that applied negative pressure on the wound. This is the first negative wound care system documented about 100 years ago. The wounds were then packed after the initial danger of gas gangrene was over. The packing cream was referred to as the Louis Mencier cream, and it contained iodoform, guaiacol, eucalyptol, balsam of Peru, and ether. Dr. Sutton, as a teacher, made voluminous notes in his own handwriting on the human anatomy with color pictures. These are preserved in the Clendening Library. Dr. Sutton performed many reconstructive and reparative surgeries, including cleft lip, cleft palate, abdominal tumor resection, and reconstruction. A letter from a grateful patient, the name is Bessie Lee, from Groom, Texas, written on November 14, 1917, quotes a saying from Dr. Sutton: "Withhold not good from them to whom it is done when it is in your hands to do it." Dr. Sutton was a farmer, an engineer, a biologist, a surgeon in war and in peace, and a teacher and a philosopher. He returned to Kansas University in 1915 and worked till his tragic and early demise in 1916. Dr. Sutton died as a complication of a ruptured appendix and peritonitis at the Christian Church Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri on November 10, 1916. 100 years ago, Dr. Sutton recognized that sepsis was a big killer in war wounds. His recommendations of save lives, save limbs, and finally repair and reconstruct is the basis of our specialty. He was a great man. Dr. LC Padgett. Dr. Padgett was born in Greenleaf, Kansas on July 8, 1893. His parents were John and Martha Padgett. The father, John Padgett, was a town barber, and he later became the president of the local bank. Dr. Padgett received his BS from KU in 1916 and MD from the Washington University in St. Louis in 1922. He did his residency at Washington University under Will Ray Blair from 1919 to 1922 and continued to work on as his assistant after he completed his training. In 1926, Dr. Thomas Orr, the chairman of the Department of Surgery at the University of Kansas Medical Center, appreciated that plastic surgery had defined itself as an important surgical subspecialty during World War I. He therefore created a section of plastic surgery and recruited Dr. Padgett to be the first chairman of the section. Dr. Padgett married Winona Humans in 1922. They have 3 children, Joyce, Patricia, and Earl Calvin. He practiced in South Dakota and in New Mexico and finally settled in Kansas City. The idea of the dermatome came to Dr. Padgett in 1938. The archives document the story of his meeting Dr. Hood at KU in Lawrence and the development of the drum and the glue. The original dermatome was made of brass and is still on display at the Glendinning Library. This monumental work is well documented in several articles in the journals. Surgery, Gynecology and Obstetrics, volume 69 in 1939, has an article by Dr. Padgett. Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, the first volume in 1948, has an article by Padgett and Stevenson. Again, Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, there's a historical account of the development of the calibrated dermatome by Dr. Lindy Ketchum. Annals of Plastic Surgery in 1981 has an article called The Personal Reflections by Catherine Stevenson and David Robinson.
Padgett invented this dermatome, which really changed and put in the hands of almost the occasional operator the opportunity to cut a good skin graft routinely and to a depth that he desired without many complications.
We had the privilege of meeting a patient of Dr. Padgett in 2011. This gentleman, Noel Davidson, was operated on by Dr. Padgett in 1932. The patient had lost his ear in an accident and it was reconstructed by Dr. Padgett using rib cartilage and skin tubes from the neck. We have a 69-year follow-up on an incredible procedure done in 1932. Dr. Padgett had 63 publications in journals and in 3 books. Dr. Padgett died on December 2, 1946, at a very young age of 53. Catherine Stevenson was born in 1912 and was one of the first female plastic surgeons to practice in the United States and the first woman to be editor of the Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery Journal. She was born in 1912 in Kansas City, Missouri, and she received her BA from the University of Arizona in 1936 and her MD from the University of Kansas Medical School in 1941. Dr. Stevenson was certified with the American Board of Plastic Surgery in 1950 and in 1951 became the first woman to join the American Association of Plastic Surgeons. She served on the board of directors of the Plastic Surgery Educational Foundation and was the founding member and president from 1967 to 68 of the California Society of Plastic Surgeons. She was also a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. Dr. David W. Robinson was at KUMC from 1946 to 1988. A native Kansan, he grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. Dr. Robinson received his AB from KU in 1935, MD from University of Pennsylvania in 1938, and MS from KU in 1948. He did his general surgery under Dr. Orr from 1940 to 43 and plastic surgery under Dr. Padgett from 1945 to 46. He was boarded by the American Board of Surgery in 1946 and American Board of Plastic Surgery in 1949. Dr. Robinson has 110 publications in journals and 7 book chapters. Dr. Robinson served in the Third Army under General Patton. He had some great stories about the war and about the liberation of some of the concentration camps. The group from KU who returned after the war took the institutions to new heights. The picture shows David Robinson, Dr. Malin Delp, Dr. David Waxman, and Dr. William Walk. Dr. Robinson and Dr. Paul Brand were great friends. Dr. Robinson was the president of ASPS, when Dr. Brand was honored by this society. Many of us who went through the hands of this gentle giant remember some of his famous quotes, one being, "You bring her, you dance with her." Dr. Robinson was chief of the section of plastic surgery from 1946 to 1973. During his tenure, the section rose to national prominence and he trained many that went on to become heads of departments. He was affectionately known as the professor's professor. He was president of the society and well respected nationally and internationally. After his death in 2004, some of us, his trainees, started a program that is today known as the Robinson Scholarship Program. We started an endowment fund that sponsors students from KUMC to an institution where he met his friend Paul Brand. To date, this program has sponsored 50 students to do their elective rotation in an international location. Dr. Frank W. Masters was at KUMC from 1958 to 1986. He was born in November 1920. He received his AB Hamilton College in 1943, MD from the University of Rochester in New York 1945. He did his general surgery at the Strong Memorial Hospital from 1945 to 51 and plastic surgery at the Duke University from 51 to 53. He moved to Kansas in 1958. Dr. Masters then went on to become the chair of the section of plastic surgery and then the chair of the Department of Surgery and president of ASPS. Dr. Lindy Ketchum. Lynn started his residency in 1964 and joined the faculty after his 2 years training. Lynn was particularly interested in hand surgery and research. Lynn was a superb researcher and did original work on tendon healing and hypertrophic scars and keloids. He wrote the definitive article on the dermatome that was designed by Dr. Padgett and Dr. Hood. He was on the full-time faculty for over 10 years before he moved to private practice in Overland Park. Dr. Ketchum has continued to play an integral role in training of plastic surgery residents as a clinical faculty member and directing the community hand surgery rotation. Mani and Mani. I joined the residency training program in 1969. This was the era where there was only one resident each year. I finished my training in 1972 and returned to my home country of India. In 1974, Dr. Robinson traveled to India to recruit me to come and run the Burnett Burn Center. My family and I returned to Kansas City in 1974 to take over as the medical director of the Burn Center. The Burn Center was on the 6th floor of the B building at that time. I was brought to KUMC to organize the Burnett Burn Center and to organize the triage and transfer throughout the state of Kansas. This was done by the members of the burn team from 1975 to 1985. A protocol was written and this was approved by the EMS leadership in Topeka. The burn team went throughout the state and trained physicians, nurses, therapists, technicians, and paramedics in burn management from the field to a definitive care facility. Later, in 1986, the burn center team took this knowledge to assist the people of Malaysia. This was a 10-year effort. A book was written and a system of care was created for the whole nation. We set up 7 units in Malaysia. This was organized under the leadership of Mr. Chandran Ariyanagam and was funded fully by the Ministry of Health Malaysia. Then the team went to Kyrgyzstan, a Central Asian republic, in 1996 and trained people there in burn care and rehabilitation. The book on burn care and the audiovisual aids used in teaching all were translated into Russian by Mrs. Louise Redford, who coordinated the entire effort, which was supported by the American International Health Alliance. The Burn Center celebrated its 10th anniversary, celebrating its achievements. Mr. and Mrs. Jean Burnett were active participants as well as several of the burn survivors. Jan Fisher is seen here with Mr. Jean Burnett. In the 20th year, in 1993, a major effort was organized by Rosie Thompson, the burn nurse educator of the burn center at that time, and her team. The goal was to move the location of the burn center from the 6th floor to a newer part of the hospital on the 5th floor, its current location. The fundraising effort was called the New Frontier Auction, and much preparation went into this. Gary Cale, a former patient and an artist using stainless steel, and David Coons, the very first admission to the burn center, are seen here. David Hurlbut, a burn survivor, was a major donor in making this dream to become a reality. The Burnett Burn Center moved to its new state-of-the-art facility in 1998. The burn center, which operated from 1973, stayed its first 25 years on 6th floor. The new facility is still the burn center with the added Hurlbut Pavilion. The residency training program. Dr. Padgett trained Dr. Robinson and Dr. Stevenson. The first resident to join the plastic surgery residency program was Dr. Creighton Harden in 1948. In the early years, there was only one resident each year. This was a pattern from 1948 to 1970. Dr. Lindy Ketchum joined Dr. Robinson and Masters on the plastic surgery faculty in 1970. After completing his residency with them at the University of Kansas Medical Center, he remained on the faculty till 1978 and developed a national reputation for his hand surgery expertise. From 1971, 2 residents were taken each year. 21 residents were trained in the early years and 66 in the next phase, that is from 1971 to 2005. The first woman in the program was Catherine Stevenson, and the second one was Carol Michnick in 1977. Since then, there were many women in the program. Dr. Harden, Dr. Bernard Kay, Dr. Tommy Kendall, Dr. Bruce Ferris, Dr. Carol Michnick, Dr. Lauren Engrave, Dr. David Apfelberg, Dr. James Hopkins, Dr. David Capel, Dr. Gary Manchester, Dr. Amabil Milano, Dr. George Pelletier, Dr. David Rubin, Dr. Sandon Safia, Dr. John Simons, Dr. Robin Sykes, Dr. Mark Taylor, Dr. Selvin Cohn, Dr. Phil Kraft. Cleft lip and cleft palate program. From the time of Dr. Sudler, surgery was a cleft lip and palate was an integral part of the service. Formal cleft clinics were organized by Dr. Robinson to include dentistry, speech and hearing, maxillofacial surgery, orthodontics, genetics, and pediatrics. This dedication to the treatment of cleft and craniofacial patients was a stimulus for Dr. Kenneth Salyer, resident from 1967 to 69, and Dr. John Kennedy to pursue craniofacial surgery as their life work and to become leaders in the field of craniofacial surgery. Dr. Salyer was the first chairman of the Division of Plastic Surgery at UT Southwest in Dallas, as well as the founder of the World Craniofacial Foundation. John Hebert. Jack Hebert is a native Kansan and son of one of the first plastic surgeons in the state of Kansas, Dr. Abe Hebert. Jack joined the section after training in Charlottesville under Dr. Edgerton. He was appointed chairman of the section of plastic surgery in 1981 and brought with him an interest in craniofacial surgery. Dr. Hebert was a key player in obtaining donations primarily from the Sutherland family, which resulted in the building of the Sutherland Institute as a new home for plastic surgery at the University of Kansas Medical Center. The Sutherland Institute groundbreaking took place in September 1991. Jack left the university for private practice after 14 years as chief of service. Dr. Hebert was succeeded in 1995 by Dr. Ned Garagis, who remained chairman of the section till June 1999, when he elected to leave the university and enter private practice in San Diego, California. During that time, Dr. Ann Kramer and her husband John Searles, as well as Dr. Federico Gonzalez, were on the clinical faculty. Dr. Thomas Lawrence succeeded Dr. Garagis as chairman of the section of plastic surgery in September 1999. Under his leadership, the plastic surgery program was approved by the Residency Review Committee. In June 2004, a 6-year integrated program of training with 3 years of course surgery training and 3 years of senior plastic surgery training was established. At this time, 2 postgraduates and residents were selected each year for the training program.
My name is Jane Lehman, and I have been associated with the Plastic Surgery Department at KU Med Center for 24 years, which is longer than many of faculty and staff. I arrived at KU in 1988 and was hired by the Department of Surgery. At that time, we were seeing patients in a surgery clinic that we shared with all of the other surgery specialties. I worked with Drs. Masters, Dr. Mani, Dr. Bice, Dr. Baker, and Dr. Hebert. Dr. Hebert's vision of a separate and specialized plastic surgery space was realized in 1992 with the opening of the Sutherland Institute. There was ample space for reconstructive, aesthetic, burn, pediatric dental, psychiatry, cleft lip and palate, and craniofacial patients. I received my plastic surgery nursing certificate and worked with 3 very talented nurses to begin the exciting concept of plastic surgery patient care under one roof. Shortly after opening our new clinic, challenging times began. Drs. Bice and Baker left, and Dr. Mani joined the Department of General Surgery. Drs. Hebert, Tobiasen, and Boraz continued alone until the arrival of Dr. John Searles and Ann Creamer. In the mid-90s, Dr. Hebert left. Dr. Searles became interim chair, followed by Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Garriguse. In 2000, Dr. Lawrence arrived and began putting order in our section. The residency program stabilized with the additions of Drs. Hendricks and Perez. Joining Dr. Lawrence were Drs. Richard Korntager and Peter Witt, who stayed for 3 years. Dr. Lawrence remained for 10 years. Dr. Korntager returned to run the burn unit and took over as a residency director. He and Dr. Hendricks brought in the present faculty, which numbers 10, and the section became a